The cab driver has his own special way of looking at life. His view of people is simpler, perhaps, than the view of someone who does another kind of work. From his high seat in the cab, he looks down at everyone. People are not important to him unless they want to go somewhere. When that happens, they are just something to carry from one place to another. You could be a president or you could be no one at all, but to a cab driver, you are just a fare, just someone who rides in his cab for a price. You get into his cab, he drives you for a while, and then he drops you off. When it is time to pay, if you pay him the exact right amount of money and no more, you will clearly see what he thinks of you. He thinks you're less than nothing. If you suddenly realize that you have no money with you, you will wish you were dead. It is probably true that the cab driver's view of life is shaped by the shape of his cab. He sits there on his seat, high above everyone. The seat is small, no one else shares it with him. While you're in his cab, your future is in his hands. You are helpless. The cab shakes you up. You can't get out until he stops his horse. If you want to speak to him, you must talk through a little hole in the back of the cab. In the cab, you no longer feel like a person. You may be someone very important, but in the cab, you're no more than something in a box, being carried from one place to another. One night, there were sounds of pleasure and joy coming from the big house next to McGarry's family restaurant. The sounds seemed to come from the rooms of the Walsh family. A crowd of curious neighbors stood outside the door. Again and again, a waiter came, bringing food or drink from the restaurant. The neighbors moved aside every time to let him pass. Then they would move close to the door again. And all the time they were talking about what was happening inside. Anyone who listened would have quickly learned that Nora Walsh was getting married. After a while, the happy people began to come out the door. They mixed with the neighbors who were standing outside. Joyful cries and laughter filled the night air. All this noise came from the drinks from McGarry's restaurant. At the edge of the street, Jerry O'Donovan's cab was waiting. No cleaner or shinier cab could be found. And Jerry's horse, I tell you, it was fat with good food. Among the moving crowd, Jerry's high hat could sometimes be seen. His thick red nose also appeared now and then, because it had been hurt in fights with passengers. His fine green coat also appeared sometimes. It was clear that Jerry had had more than enough to drink. Everyone noticed it. Out of the crowd on the street, or maybe from the people walking past the house, came a young woman. She stopped beside the cab. Jerry saw her, a new fare. He moved quickly, and 3 or 4 people near him fell down. He almost lost his balance, but no. He caught himself just in time. Quickly, he climbed up to his seat. Once he was there, he was safe. No amount of McGarry's drink could make him fall from there. "Step in, lady," said Jerry. The young woman stepped into the cab. The door closed. The crowd on the street jumped away. The horse started, and the fine cab rolled down the street. At first, the horse went fast, but after a little while, he slowed down. Then Jerry called down through the hole in the back of the cab. He tried to make his voice soft, hoping to please her. "Where would you like to go?" he asked. "Any place you wish," was the answer. The voice was happy. It sounded like music. "She's just riding for fun," Jerry thought. Then he said, "Let's take a trip in the park, lady. It will be cool and nice." "Just as you wish," answered the fare, happily. The cab turned toward Fifth Avenue, then went north on that perfect street. Jerry was moved up and down in his seat, from side to side. McGarry's drinks moved inside his head, and he began to sing. Inside the cab, the fare sat straight on the seat. She looked to the right and to the left at the lights and the houses. It was dark inside the cab, but her eyes were shining like stars. When they reached 59th Street, Jerry was half asleep, but his horse went through the park gate. The horse knew where they were. The horse pulled the cab into the park every night. And the fare sat there, as if in a happy dream. She could smell the fresh, clean scent of the green leaves and flowers. The wise animal pulling the cab moved calmly, as usual. He was at home there. Jerry also tried to do what he did every night. His voice was thick, but he still asked the questions that cab drivers always ask in the park. "Would you like to stop at the casino restaurant, lady? Have something to eat? Listen to the music? Everyone stops there." "I think that would be nice," said the fare. They made a sudden stop at the restaurant's door. The cab door opened. The fare stepped out. She was immediately taken by the wonderful music. The lights and the colors were bright, almost blinding. Someone put a piece of paper in her hand. On it was a number, 34. She looked around and saw her cab. It was about 20 yards away, taking its place in a line with other waiting cabs. She was led inside, and soon she was seated at a table. She realized that she was expected to buy something. She had a little money. She counted it and found that she had enough to buy something cold and fresh to drink. She sat there, drinking slowly, and looking at everything around her. Life there seemed new, with a new color and shape. It didn't seem real. It was like a beautiful dream. At 50 tables sat people who looked to her like kings and queens. She thought their clothes and jewels were wonderfully rich. And now and then, one of these people would look at her. They saw a small woman in a simple dress. They saw a plain face. But on that face, they saw an expression of love for life. And the queens wished they could look the same. While she sat there, 2 hours passed. The kings and queens began to leave. Their cabs rolled away. The music stopped. The waiters took everything off the tables near hers. She was sitting there almost alone. The fare stood up and held out the numbered piece of paper. "Is someone going to give me something for this?" she asked. A waiter told her that it was for her cab. He said that she should go to the door and give it to the man there. This man took it and called the number. Only 3 cabs were left in line. The driver of one of them went and found Jerry asleep inside his cab. Jerry muttered a few words in anger, then went up to his seat. He turned the horse around, and the cab rolled to the door and stopped. His fare entered. The cab turned again and went through the cool darkness of the park, following the street that would lead most quickly to the gate. At the gate, Jerry suddenly began to think. He was still half asleep, but there was a doubt in his mind. There were 1 or 2 things he needed to ask about. He stopped his horse, and his voice came down through the hole in the back of the cab. "I want to see $4 before we go any farther. Do you have the money?" "$4," laughed the fare softly. "No, I only have a few cents with me." Jerry made the horse run faster. The animal's feet were loud on the street. But above the noise of the horse's feet, Jerry's angry voice could be heard. He shouted at the stars in the sky. He shouted at the other cabs as they passed. His words were so bad that another driver, hearing them, could not believe his ears. But Jerry knew what he could do about this fare without money. He knew exactly where he was going. At the building with the green lights by the door, he pulled his horse to a stop. He opened the cab door and jumped to the ground. "Come on, you," he said in a hard voice. The fare stepped out, still wearing the dreamy smile on her plain face. Jerry grabbed her arm and led her inside. He was going to tell the police what had happened. They would know what to do about it. A gray-haired policeman looked across the table. He and the cab driver were not strangers. Jerry started in his loud, hard voice. "I've got a fare here that." But Jerry stopped. He put his hand, red from the weather, to his face. The drink from McGarry's restaurant no longer clouded his mind. "A fare, sir," he continued with a wide smile, "that I want you to meet. It's my wife, the one I married at Old Man Walsh's tonight. And yes, we had a wild time. Shake hands with him, Nora, and we'll go home." Before getting back into the cab, Nora took a long, deep breath. "I've had a very nice time, Jerry," she said. "In fact, I think I'll be leaving you right here."